Welcome to The Green Tunnel, a podcast on the history of the Appalachian Trail. My name is Mills Kelly, and I'm your host. Today we're doing something a little different. We're headed to Florida. I mean, who doesn't want to go to Florida in the summer? Now, I know the AT doesn't run through Florida, but the state has a lot of great trails, including the Florida Trail. And one of the best ways for you to learn about the FT, not the AT, is by listening to Orange Blaze. This podcast highlights the experience of hikers along the Florida Trail and is hosted by Misti Ridley Little, who thru-hiked the AT with her husband. The FT is about 1,500 miles long and runs across Florida from Big Cypress National Preserve in the south to the Gulf Islands National Seashore in the western end of Florida's Panhandle. In this episode, Misti talks with Johnny Malloy, who is the author of more than 80 books, many of which are trail guides. They discuss his FT thru-hike and his life, which involves spending a lot of time camping and writing books. I hope you enjoy this episode, and we'll check out other episodes of Orange Blaze.
You're listening to Orange Blaze, a Florida Trail podcast.
I always like to jump in the creek, and I'll do that. I have some odd practices or some not normal. I don't treat my water. I just drink it everywhere. So consider it do as I say and not as I do advice. But I just drink the water. I mainly sleep out unless I absolutely have to have some kind of covering. Now in Florida, a lot of times when it's warm, you got to battle the mosquitoes, so you've got to have at least a screen shelter.
Yeah.
One thing about my through hike of the Florida Trail was I took a chance. I just used a little screen netting with no hiking poles, just the netting that went into a ball about the size of a water bottle. And then for my shelter, I used nothing but a poncho, and I made it the whole way.
Wow.
Yeah.
Welcome back to a fresh season of the podcast. I'm your host, Misti Ridley Little, and that was Johnny Malloy. Johnny is the author of more than 80 books. Many of them are trail guides to various regions in the United States, but he's written several memoirs as well, including his Florida Trail memoir, Hiking the Florida Trail, 1,100 miles, 78 days, 2 pairs of boots, and one heck of an adventure, about his 2006 thru-hike. In this episode, Johnny and I chat about his thru-hike, but also about how he crafted a life that involves spending a lot of time camping and being outdoors while writing books as well. He's got a lot of wisdom from those years outside, and I don't think it will escape any hiking or nature enthusiast who finds themselves rearranging their life to spend more time outdoors. I'm excited for this fresh new season and look forward to sharing a lot of new conversations as the coming months go by. All right, on to this episode with Johnny. All right. Well, thank you, Johnny, for coming on the Orange Blaze podcast tonight. Maybe if you take a little bit of time to introduce yourself, who you are and where you're from. Folks may or may not have read your Florida Trail book, but there's a good chance out of all the things you've written that they've read one of your other books. So maybe, just start from there and introduce yourself a little bit.
Well, good. I'm Johnny Malloy, an outdoor writer based in Johnson City, Tennessee. And the outdoors is my life, and I've turned it into a career. I've been very blessed in that. And I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, a complete flatlander who never camped out a day in my life. And then I moved to Knoxville, Tennessee to go to the University of Tennessee. And I met a guy there who liked backpacking. And right next to Knoxville is Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And he took me backpacking one time, and I thought it was the greatest thing that I've ever done. And here we are 4 decades later, and I went backpacking 3 days ago.
Yeah, you definitely get out and about. That is for sure. Whether it's just for fun or for any of your work projects. So you got into hiking by going out with a friend in college, but how did you get into, were you always a writer, or did you get into the writing part of that later?
I graduated with a degree in economics from the University of Tennessee. and I became kind of a backpacking bum, kind of like a ski bum.
Mm-hmm.
And I just bartended on Friday and Saturday night, and then I backpacked during the week. And over a period of time, I accumulated over 400 nights backpacked in the Smoky Mountains National Park. And a friend of mine who actually had a writing degree said, "You ought to write a book about your adventures, and I'll help you." And I actually took out a pen and paper and wrote it by longhand, and he typed it for me. And we got this book together, and this was before the internet. So I just went to some bookstores and found some addresses and sent off a query letter saying I have an adventure story book about the Smokies, my backpacks in the Smokies. And lo and behold, one publisher said, "Yeah, we're interested in that type of memoir book." And another publisher said, "We're not interested in your memoir book, but based on your experience and writing ability, would you write a hiking guide to the Smokies?" So I got 2 books with one query letter, which is almost unheard of.
Yeah, that's cool.
So so then I got a contract for a book, and I took it to the bank, and I got one of these newfangled laptop computers and borrowed the money from the bank, and then wrote the book on this computer, rewrote it again, cleaned it up and all that, turned it in, did a good job. And my first book came out in 1995, and now I've got over 80 books published.
Wow. And so is that first book, is that still in print, or could we find it?
Sure enough.
Yeah.
They actually reissued a 20th anniversary edition. It's called Trial by Trail. It's true adventures in the Smokies that also woven in with Smokies lore and backpacking tips. And speaking of backpacking tips, interestingly, I just turned in a book called Backpacking Florida, where I've got 40 different backpacking adventures in the Sunshine State. And woven into that are backpacking how-to and stuff like that, how-to things, along with the where-to for this Backpacking Florida book.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm going to definitely have to find that first book because I'm very intrigued. And I like to read older memoirs just to get a feel of how things were before there was crowds. Yeah.
Absolutely. At that time, because it does capture a moment in time, the world of the park and the outdoors, and the mindset of the people, and my own viewpoints of that time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's cool. We could talk about that upcoming book towards the end when we get to your other projects that you've got on the agenda. But so, you said you spend, a ton of time outdoors every year. And I think you have it kind of cataloged on your website, but maybe it's changed. But what's the most recent tally of nights in the outdoors?
Well, I've averaged over 150 nights a year camping out for the past 30 straight years. So that's over 4,500 nights camped out. That includes backpacking, canoe camping, car camping, working on a book, camping. And I've stuck with that. And it's been just such a blessing. People say, "Have you seen that movie? Have you seen this show? Have you done?" And when I say to them, "You would not believe the sights in nature that I have seen, that you've got to go experience firsthand to truly appreciate."
Right. Now, do you have any favorite places? I mean, you live near the Smokies, so I'm sure you get down there quite often, but is that one of your favorite places to go, or are there some other places that you really like to get to every year?
Well, if I did have another favorite place, I wouldn't tell you. But the Smokies is the greatest of the greatest. And I've been blessed to backpack to over 800 nights just in that park, and just was up in the Smokies last week backpacking. It is a gorgeous place. Florida has a lot of great places. I've spent the better part of 25 straight winters in Florida, camping out the whole time, exploring it. A few other great places that I really like: Shenandoah National Park in Virginia, the Ozarks, great for hiking and canoeing, and also the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness in Minnesota.
Yeah.
I've been up there like 16 times, and that was the longest trip of my life. 2 years ago, we went for a 21-day trip through there.
Yeah, that's high on my list of places I want to get to at some point. Logistically, I've got to get up there, and but I would love to explore that area. I know it's becoming a little more popular, but it's still kind of out of the way enough that I think it's pretty quiet. Has that been your experience?
It's just like anywhere. There's busy places and there's quiet places. The harder you want to work, the more solitude you can find.
Right.
But the bottom line is this: life is for living, and adventures are for having.
I like that motto. So you do a lot of short trips, and I know the Florida Trail, you've through hiked it, but are there any other like through hikes that you've done, or you've done some long distance paddling as well? What are some of those memorable trips?
Well, I paddled from the Okefenokee Swamp in Georgia down the Swanee River and all the way to the Keys in Florida one time.
Oh, that's cool.
So that was fun, and wrote a book about it. It's about Florida's history. And I'll also did a complete rafting trip through the entirety of the Grand Canyon. That was also 3 weeks. And that was a lot of fun. In backpacking, I've through hiked the Sheltowee Trace in Kentucky. And that's it for long trails as far as continuous hikes.
Yeah. Do you have any desire to do any long distance like through hikes like that, or is that not really your speed?
I would. No, I would. This is writing these outdoor guides is my one and only job. So I like to go where the books take me.
Yeah.
And so I feel blessed beyond measure that I actually get paid to do what I love for a living. And if somebody wants to pay me to hike a long trail, then I'll do it.
Right. So you go where you can make the income, but also be outside enjoying life as well. So I understand.
Absolutely. Like last summer, I wrote this book called Hiking the Berkshires. It's a mountain range in Western Massachusetts. And it was just beautiful. Get to spend the summer up there camping out, hiking, and just enjoying the sights and the people and everything. And then I'm in the middle of working on another book called Hiking New Jersey. And that's what I said, some guys had written the book, but they didn't want to update it. So I just did a complete new redo of the book. And I can tell you that hiking in New Jersey is a lot better than what a lot of people may think. I've been happily surprised. I've done half the book last fall, and then I'm going ahead this spring and doing it the other half of the book. And that proves the adage that everywhere is beautiful. You just got to know where to look.
Yeah.
And that's what I do. I help people find the beautiful places because they're busy in their lives, and I hopefully will save them the trouble of making the mistakes and going to the wrong places and get them steered on the right places.
Yeah, the New Jersey segment of the Appalachian Trail was definitely much prettier than I imagined when, we through hiked the Appalachian Trail. When I got there, I was like, wow, this place is really pretty amazing. And it's probably one of my favorite sections of that mid-Atlantic area for sure. Yeah,
that Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area has that segment of the Appalachian Trail and a lot of connectors. And it's a really good area, just because of the highest point. One thing is that when people talk about backpacking, they almost always think it's got to be mountain backpacking.
Yeah.
Really, you're only limiting your own self by saying, I got to hike only in the mountains. Because if everywhere looked like East Tennessee, then nowhere else would be special. So we're glad that everywhere looks different.
Right. Now, what does it take to write these books? I mean, I'm sure you've 80 books down, you probably have a format ready, but I don't know if they vary by publisher at all. So maybe your formats have to change, but do you have it down pretty easily?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do you interview people when you're going out, or is it just you hiking and you're scouting and looking to see what's available in towns for restaurant?
Discernment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I do is just try to kind of peruse all the possible sources of the best hikes for an area, and then kind of gather a master list of potential hikes. And then I literally go out and hike them. And that's the reason I do what I do, is so I can do what I do. And get up there and take the notes and photographs and GPS for maps and such. But really, the key to what I do is I'm accurate and I'm timely, and I give the publisher and the reader what they want. I think about what would I want to know about this hike if I were the guy going on it or the girl going on it, and what would I want to know? Was this a good hike? Because see, the thing is, people are betting their time and their money that Johnny Malloy knows what he's talking about. And I think about that all the time, and I want to give them the experience they desire, and let them make the most of their precious time.
Right. Has there been any place that you've gone that maybe you went in with some preconceived notion of it not being great, and then came out, we're like, oh my gosh, this is a really great trail? Like any hidden gems out there that you've come across?
Yeah. Well, I wrote a book called Hiking Waterfalls in Pennsylvania. And I didn't think the waterfalls or the woods and stuff was going to be that good. And I was completely wrong. In fact, the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area, the Delaware River divides New Jersey from Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And on the Pennsylvania side are some gigantic, beautiful waterfalls that make great hiking destinations. And they've got a lot of large backcountry areas in Pennsylvania, not like the giant national forests they got around here, like Cherokee National Forest and
Mm-hmm.
Pisgah and the Nantahala. I mean, there's over a million acres of national forest within 100 miles of Johnson City, Tennessee, where I live. But yet they have in Pennsylvania a lot of large hiking areas and backpacking, and a significant segment of the Appalachian Trail.
So was it for your through hike of the Florida Trail, was it a field guide that brought you there to through hike it, or was that something you just had on your list? You're like, I'm gonna go through hike it, I've got some time.
Well, when I first got into this book writing business, and actually even before that, if you've backpacked a lot in the winter in the Smoky Mountains National Park, it is very challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just flipped through an atlas, and looked down and saw Florida, and I saw these big giant splotches of green national forests and national parks and stuff. So I said, why not go down there? And so I convinced a publisher to let me do a book down there. And then that book led to another book, and it led to a bunch of books. And so I was spending the winters down in Florida, Paddler's Guide to Everglades National Park and so forth. And I thought, how can I spend another winter in Florida and get paid for it? And so that I did. And I proposed to the University Press of Florida to write an adventure story book about through hiking the Florida Trail. And nobody'd written one. And I'm sure you're familiar with all the memoir type books about the Appalachian Trail, but nobody done one about the Florida Trail.
And I think yours was the first book that was ever published, right?
Yep. And the only one that I know of. But so I got a contract for that, and the next thing I know, somebody was dropping me off at the trailhead.
Yeah, I mean, and you said you'd done some stuff in Florida, but were you that familiar with the Florida Trail at all? Did you do?
Yeah, yes, I was very familiar with it. I backpacked a bunch of it.
Okay.
And, I've hiked it. I did a book called The Hiking Trails of Florida's National Forests, Parks, and Preserves. So I've hiked every trail in Florida's national forests.
Oh, wow, that's impressive.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Some people think it is. I mean, I love it. I love that kind of stuff. I mean, love being outside. So
yeah, I mean, I think it's cool because you go to these more obscure trails that people aren't necessarily going out to, and some of them are harder to get to than others, and some may or may not have something interesting on them. They're just a nice trail, but they may not have anything that the general public always wants to see. But I think it's cool that you've done all of them.
yeah, so I was familiar with the Florida Trail, and so there I found myself on Loop Road down there in the Big Cypress National Preserve, which I believe has the most unique backpacking in the lower 48, by the way. There's a lot of aspects of the Florida Trail that are unique that people don't give it credit for. It's really, I was reminded of that working on this Backpacking Florida book, but there I was on Loop Road. Now they've moved the beginning of the Florida Trail a few miles north of the US 41 visitor center. But at that time, there I stood and I was kind of nervous. My friends dropped me off and I was standing there just kind of getting my mojo together. And then this guy comes up to me and says, "Excuse me, did one of you drop this?" And it was my wallet. It had like $500 in it. So that was a pretty odd start to the thing. But then after that, it was just a beautiful experience. And it really it did affect my life. After through hiking the Florida Trail, that I just realized that nature is the manifestation, the physical, visible manifestation of God's glory. And from beginning to end, I saw it. And I really recommitted my life to God after that hike was over.
Now, when you're there at the beginning of Trail of Loop Road, and you hiked this trail in 2006, I mean, what was it like hiking back then? I hiked it in 2011, so it was still before social media and this current more popularity of the Florida Trail in the last 5 years. So it was still pretty quiet when I hiked it, but I can imagine in 2006 it was even more quiet. Were you excited about that quietness? Was it still a little
yes,
curious?
Well, to contrast, the hiking the Appalachian Trail has become a complete social experience. People who are don't know each other beforehand, but by the whims of who knows what, they all end up on the same spot of the same trail at the same time, and they begin to meet one another, and then they begin to walk together, and then it becomes a rolling social experience. Unlike a lot of people are aware of that now, but it used to be people that used to think they're going to be in nature all the time, but it's not that way. However, the Florida Trail, out of 78 days, I camped with people I did not know twice. And that was just a fluke that I was even camped with them. So if you're a person who's truly looking for solitude and truly looking to reconnect with nature on nature's terms, and the Florida Trail is a superior experience to the Appalachian Trail, even though there's more road walking, and there was probably more road walking in 2006 than before. But yet, if you really want to be out in nature on your own, Florida Trail delivers.
Well, and you mentioned the road walks. I wanted to ask about trail conditions at that time, because some of the trail has been moved off of the road walks, but I imagine there was definitely more then. And I mean, was it maintained well back then? And what was going through your mind as you're walking through this trail up from Big Cypress to the Alabama border?
Well, really, it was just as wet as it is now. So really, it was in fine shape. And if I think I would even say that not the kind of road walk type places were better blazed than they are now, because then there weren't as much instruction as to what to do if you were not in the back country.
Right.
You just had to follow the blazes and hope for the best. Now
Right.
everybody can whip out their phone and do this and that and don't even really need a blaze.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we didn't even use it. We used old school maps for our hike too. There were plenty of times we had to dig our maps out and be like, okay, I haven't seen a blaze in like half a mile. Did we miss something?
Yeah. So, but I was familiar enough with the big, what I call the big four areas of the Florida Trail, which I included in this Backpacking Florida book. Are the Big Cypress National Preserve. Again, there's nowhere else. Like, okay, say if you're hiking in the Smoky Mountains National Park, it's more like Shenandoah National Park than it is unlike Shenandoah National Park. The Big Cypress National Preserve is unlike anywhere.
Right.
And the backpacking there, I mean, it's just so much fun and so beautiful, and it's challenging. And you really got to have your stuff together. And when you're hiking through the water for mile after mile after mile, here's the saying: as mountains are to the Appalachians, water is to the Florida Trail. As mountains are to the Appalachian Trail, water is to the Florida Trail. And so you get it in spades in the Big Cypress. And then the Ocala National Forest, another superlative, superior, the world's largest sand pine scrub forest on the planet. And you can hike for 67 miles on the Florida Trail through that. And I just love that place. And the smell, the sights, the feel, everything about it. And then the third big one is hiking the Florida Trail along the Swanee River, which the Swanee River is Florida's contribution to great rivers of the world. And you get to hike along it, and just the biodiversity, the sandbars, the tannic streams, the towering trees. I just did that. I just did an 82-mile hike in January along that. That was one of the final hikes for my Backpacking Florida book. And then the fourth of the big four is the Apalachicola National Forest, and it's got about a 60-mile segment of the Florida Trail. The Apalachicola National Forest is a very unforgiving place. It does not care. It doesn't care if you're there. It doesn't care if you're not there. It gives no quarter. And it is just it is starkly beautiful, yet has its own challenges. And I think it's one of my favorite places to go. And I go there for a period of time every winter.
Yeah, people get out of Big Cypress and think, okay, well, I'm mostly done with the water. And then Apalachicola really throws it back at you.
It absolutely does. The infamous Bradwell Bay. I took a buddy of mine from East Tennessee down there, and we went through the Bradwell Bay, and it was really high water. And he could not believe it. And I mean, he was just in shock, even though I tried to tell him. And it was high water. And I mean, it was just unbelievable. But you know what? He'll never forget it. If you do the same old thing over and over and you don't experience new places and new settings, then you won't make memories as good as you do when you go new places.
Right. Absolutely. Now, I think you hiked with some friends when you first started a little bit. Did they ever get to join? And like I said, it's been a few years since I read your book, and I'm trying to refresh my memory on some of it, but I didn't know if they came back out to hike with you other times on the Florida Trail, or if they've been back out since your hike on the Florida Trail.
One guy did join me a couple of times. But two guys went with me right off the bat in the Big Cypress. And they lived in Miami, and they'd heard of the legendary Big Cypress. But it was funny because at the same time they were trying to section hike the Appalachian Trail.
Oh, okay.
And they talk up these big long stories about challenging treks up in this neck of the woods. But this one guy, I mean, it just flat out kicked him, the big cypress. But that's part of it. If we're not, part of what I love about my job is the physical challenge. There's not a whole lot of jobs where you got a lot of physical challenge and a lot of mental challenge. The physical challenge being the actual hiking, the mental challenge being the writing part. Because just in the past couple of years, I did also backpack in Tennessee, which has almost 700 miles of backpacking in it.
Oh, wow.
And the Florida backpacking book has over 600, as does a book I wrote that came out a few years ago called Backpacking Virginia. And the fact is, backpacking is a very challenging thing. And if you're pain averse, you're not going to like it.
That's true. Yep. I was actually out on the trail, on the Lone Star Trail this weekend. Did an overnight with my niece and her scout troop, and my feet are feeling it because it's been a few months since I've been on the trail again. And so I'm definitely feeling the pain, but I'm also feeling like I could have gone for several more days out there and sucked it up and done it.
I've always wanted to get on that trail, but the only thing worse than being sore from doing it is not having done it at all.
Absolutely. I agree.
So I just want to encourage anybody that's listening here to there isn't always tomorrow. That we put off things and we put off things and we put off things. I have been an outdoor enthusiast for nearly 40 years, and I've been self-employed. I've been able to do what I want, when I want, how I want, and even I cannot do it all. So I encourage you to follow whatever dreams you may have in the outdoor. Just you got to make it happen.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been coming up with a list of things I want to get done this spring, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get all the cool places I want to see in East Texas, but I'm going to try.
Absolutely. So how long is that in that Lone Star Trail? Is it 128 miles or something like that?
I think it's like somewhere between 90 and 100, and then there's some like side trails involved in it. And I've done many sections, but we've never pieced the whole thing together. And that's something I want to do, is piece the whole thing together. And there's a few roadwalks, but it's not terrible. It's mostly rural areas. But it's nice. The west side of the trail is very different from the east side. Forest habitats change. It's cool. It's easy access from Houston and this area, so it's a good place for people to escape to.
Well, that sounds good.
Yeah, I wish Texas had more trails like that, but we're lacking in a lot of public land space.
Yep. So that's why I was saying how blessed I am to have. I can go. The Appalachian Trail is. I can get to multiple trailheads within 20 miles of my house, and like I said, that millions of acres of national forest land just within quick shooting distance of myself. And that's why most of the books I've written, books covering all or parts of 26 states. But if you imagine the 11 former Confederate states in the Southeast, that's where most of my books have been. And what it amounts to is I'm also not only just writing it once, but I'm updating. Like I've got a book, 50 Hikes in the North Georgia Mountains. I'm working on the fourth update of that right now, the fourth edition. And I get to revisit places, and that's a lot of fun. Fixing to do a book, redo a book at New River Gorge National Park. It's a national park now, so that's going to be a lot of fun this summer.
Now, on your Florida trail hike or any of your other trail hikes, or I guess honestly anywhere you've been, have you had any cool like wildlife sightings? I mean, sure, you've seen tons of bears in the Smokies, but any panthers on the Florida Trail, or
Yes, I have seen. I've seen panthers twice in my life, and one of them was hiking the Florida Trail around Lake Okeechobee.
Oh, wow.
And I was with a guy, and we just turned a corner, and there he was. And I mean, I could not believe they're way bigger, or it's way bigger than what I thought it would be like. And yeah, that was a thrill. I was glad to see one after seeing all those panther warning signs.
Yeah.
And I also saw one in the Big Cypress another time. So, but I was in a car. But that was that was a thrill. But wildlife is a part of an experience. People always want to know those kind of stories. And I've had a bear step on me twice in my life. It might be my closest encounters. And they were both backpacking. I was in the Smoky Mountains National Park, and this is a long time ago, and they didn't have the bear. They got these food storage cables nowadays, but they didn't then. And this buddy of mine had these tomatoes that he'd brought. We were backpacking, and I came up and looked over, and that bear had grabbed the bag of tomatoes and was backing out of the campsite. And we ran him off, but he came back later on. And so I'd kind of slept near my backpack to alert myself as to the bear arriving. And he stepped on me before he stepped on the backpack. And that was crazy. And it was right about dawn. So I didn't know what it was going on, and I was asleep, but he ran off. So another time I was in Virginia, and it was the same thing. This food habituated bear had come to this campsite. It was in the backcountry, but there happened to be like 2 or 3 parties there because it was a weekend. And he literally just rained on these people. It was a college group that was out and just tore through their tents and everything. They'd left food everywhere.
Oh, man.
And somehow he made his way over to me, and I'd hung my pack up by that point, but I was laying there in a sleeping bag, just sleeping out on the ground. And he just stepped right on me. I don't know if he thought I was a pack or what, but and I was zipped up in my sleeping bag, and I couldn't get my arms out, and I was trying to unzip it real quick, defend myself, but I don't know what I could do.
Yeah, I mean, that's a way to wake up, man. You're not sure if you're going to be alive very long.
Yeah, I hear you. And but that's part of the outdoor experience, is seeing the fauna of all sorts. I mean, you spend enough time out there, you'll see everything. But also the flora is good too. And that's another thing about the timing. You know, we all want to be where, you know, we're going on spring wildflower season. Take some time to get out there and do it, and see some beautiful wildflowers, and to see spring blooms of trees. I mean, the world is a beautiful place.
Yeah, that's my list for the spring, is some spring wildflowers and rare plants in East Texas that I'm trying to research and figure out exactly where they may or may not be, and get out and see some of that stuff, because, you know, you can read all about them and know that they're there, but unless you go and track them down, you're never going to see them there. And I think that's one of the cool things about hiking too, is sometimes you stumble across the things that you didn't know, you didn't know, that, you know, you come across the rare plants, the interesting tidbits of wildlife that are living out there, and unless you're out there hiking, you don't see it.
That's why, you know, this virtual world is a joke in a lot of ways, because you cannot experience cold, heat, smell, sound. We were just backpacking just the other day, just right near my house, and we're standing on an outcrop on top of a mountain, but it rained a bunch. And while we're standing there, we could hear this waterfall falling from the top of the mountain, working its way down. And it was just really loud because it rained a lot. And just, you got to get out there to feel it. And then that evening, an incredible wind came up, and I didn't have a tent or anything. I was just sleeping out on the ground, and I felt like I was sleeping in front of a gigantic fan. But and it's not always pleasant, but guess what? I remember it.
Well, and you appreciate coming home to a warm shower and a little bit of creature comforts more than you did if you were sensitized to it all the time.
I hear you. Just when I was down in Florida, I finished that book up, and I was down there for 5 straight weeks. I was down there for 35 days, hiked 280 miles, and took 3 showers while I was down there.
It's easy to get smelly, that's for sure.
Yeah, and you know what? And nothing like I always like to jump in the creek, and I'll do that. I have some odd practices or some not normal. I don't treat my water. I just drink it everywhere. So consider it do as I say and not as I do advice. But I just drink the water. I mainly sleep out unless I absolutely have to have some kind of covering. Now in Florida, a lot of times when it's warm, you got to battle the mosquitoes. So you've got to have at least a screen shelter. One thing about my through hike of the Florida Trail was I took a chance. I just used a little screen netting with no hiking poles, just the netting that went into a ball about the size of a water bottle. And then for my shelter, I used nothing but a poncho, and I made it the whole way.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and I thought you didn't filter your water, and I was like, maybe I'm remembering this wrong. And because people get on the Florida Trail, especially around the agricultural areas, they get very squeamish about it. And when we hiked, there was not a lot of trail angels. There was nobody putting water out, and now everybody puts water out. And then here you are, just like drinking it straight from the canal.
Yeah, because you know what? A filter ain't going to get whatever somebody's scared of in a canal. I don't think a filter is going to get rid of it. It's not going to get rid of fertilizer or whatever people are scared of.
Yeah.
But I'm just I've spent so much time in the outdoors. I just kind of think, try to get me sick, try to get me hurt or whatever. And it's maybe my own little myth, but
I'm sure you're choosy about it. You're not exactly going to filter water where cows have been waiting,
right.
That
correct.
Sort of thing either. You're not doing that sort of thing. But I mean, you have never had Giardia or anything else?
I never have.
Wow, that's impressive.
I hear you. I've been with 3 different people who did. So I don't know. See, when I first started going to the Smokies, the guy that took me the first time, he just drank the water. So I just did what he did. And so I just kind of kept it up. Boy, it saved me a lot of trouble because I see people messing with water all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so, I mean, in all your trail miles and your time in Florida, did you have any interesting encounters with, people, trail angels or volunteers, or just, the random folks that cross your path along your hikes? Anybody that's memorable and stands out?
Not really. Not like you think, because see, my experience, like I was going back to that social thing. See, by the time I threw like the Florida Trail, I'd already backpacked, probably 1,500 nights or something like that. So I knew what floats my boat, so to speak. Most people that do these long trails, especially like Appalachian Trail through hiking, they mostly haven't camped that much. And so the notion of spending night after night by themselves is not a pleasant one. They're not used to silence. They're not used to limited social interaction. So they seek it out, and they band with other people. Whereas me, I was out there trying to experience Florida and not necessarily the people of Florida.
Right. Now, to piggyback off of that a little bit, is because the Florida Trail is becoming a little more sociable. People do have tended to get into little groups of hikers, and there is a much more detailed trail angel grouping now, and I'm sure social media helped with a lot of that. But I do know there's plenty of other hikers who are like you. I don't know if you're familiar with Grits. Have you ever met him? I can't think of his in real life name, but he's one of those hikers that, has just a regular old cell phone, tends to steer clear from people, and if you know him, you know him, but if you don't, he's going to be that ghost on the trail that's out there hiking. And there's people that are still like you out there, and I appreciate all that.
I hear you. The thing is, if you do it, I don't feel a need to scream and shout what I've done. That posting something I've done is not the thrill. I don't. I think a lot of people do it because we all want to be loved. It's a fact, and I'm just not one of those people who wants to.
Yeah, you don't need to tell them.
just for hiking a trail, and what's really funny is the whole trail angel thing is funny because most of the people who are through hikers are people who have the means to do it. They don't need a trail angel. You know what I mean? It's like, why should I go cook some hamburgers for some people who already figured out how to take 6 months off of work and go enjoy themselves? Now, if you want a camaraderie with them, that's fine. But for my own self, I've never understood that concept.
Okay. All right. Now, is there a reason why you chose to finish the Florida Trail at the Alabama border instead of at Fort Pickens?
Yes, 2 reasons. Number one is the Blackwater River State Forest is such a beautiful place. And I think you have less road walk when you finish, and now, by the way, the Florida Trail does not exist in the Blackwater River State Forest. They have now just made one way, and you just end at the Gulf now because they've renamed the trail. Because I just hiked the Blackwater River State Forest last month. But I chose it because I wanted to do the maximum backwoods hiking rather than road walking and trying to figure out where to spend the night there at the end.
Yeah. That end is tricky. I think there is a campsite now on the backside of Santa Rosa Island, but and we chose not to stay there. My father-in-law had come down to pick us up at the end of the trail, and so we had a nice hotel room that night. But I know a lot of people who get stuck in that area.
No other choice.
Yeah. It's a tricky area for sure. I mean, and honestly, that's my complaint on some various areas of the road walks as well. There is just no safe camping. You have to do a lot of stealth camping and hope nobody runs you off their private property.
I hear you, because that was another funny thing about my through hike of the Florida Trail. I didn't have a stove or anything, so if I wanted to cook or have coffee in the morning, I had to make a fire. And so that was very challenging in times and places of making a fire in kind of an odd situation like that.
Yeah. So you made a fire most times when you camped or not?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I did, because I love to drink coffee. And I got to boil some water in the morning to have coffee.
Yeah. Do you still do that now? Do you still can't make fires, or do you have a stove?
No, I'm a throwback guy.
Okay.
See, the way I figure it is this. If I have to carry that stove, I've got to expend a certain amount of energy carrying the stove and the fuel. So instead, I don't have to carry the stove and fuel and then expend twice as much energy hunting down wood. So,
right.
But no, I really, the atmosphere of a fire and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Part of it. And just a stove is something that can break.
Yeah. Well, I know some through hikers who don't even enjoy a nice fire at camp anymore. Some people are just like, They get into camp, they go to sleep, they get back up, they do the miles. But I don't know, that part of the fire, maybe not every night, but it's nice to have a little fire. There's something about that in camping out and having a little fire.
It's part of it. We've only been doing that as long as man has been in existence.
Right.
So I'm not going to, I'm certainly not going to feel guilty about making a fire.
Now, I know you've mentioned, the big 4 areas that of the Florida Trail, but is there any favorite sections of the trail that you go to time and time again?
Yeah. Besides
the big 4, maybe?
Besides the big 4, I go to the Osceola National Forest. I go there repeatedly. And there's also, I'm trying to think of this is called Bull Creek Wildlife Management Area.
Yeah, I like that area.
It's beautiful. It's got good views. That's one thing that's funny about Florida, the Florida Trail, is they think you got to be standing on top of a mountain to have a good view. But actually, the prairies in Florida have expansive views that mountainous areas cannot compete with because they're completely different.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the same. And Bull Creek's one of those places. 3 Lakes Wildlife Management Area is another place where they're almost touch one another,
mm-hmm.
where they've got these prairies with these great views.
Yeah, and a lot of people will say Florida is their best places that they've seen sunsets, and I have to agree. I think it's one of the better places for sunsets, even without that big mountain view that you would expect for a sunset. I don't know, the colors of the sky in the wintertime in Florida are amazing.
I'm with you. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, I wrote Paddler's Guide to Everglades National Park. I've paddled in the backcountry. I've camped over 400 nights in the Everglades backcountry as well. And there's nothing like being camped on an island in the Gulf of Mexico that's a national park, natural beach, unimproved works of God, and you're looking at the sunset over the Gulf of Mexico. And the next thing west would be where you're at.
Yep. Yeah, and there's nobody around you for 30 miles or more.
Yeah, it's really cool. And you can't get that everywhere in superlative sunsets.
Yeah, that is one thing I missed about, I lived in Florida for about 8 years, and one thing we never did was that paddling along the 10,000 islands out there. And I kick myself for not doing it. And someday I'm going to make a trip out there just to do it. Because I know how special it is. Yeah, I know, right?
That is it. There's some great rivers. And additionally, Florida has another great paddling overnight canoe camping or kayak camping along the Swanee River. You can go for 200 miles. And they have public lands where you can freely camp and not have to worry about somebody, be it trespassing or something like that. And there's some great paddling experiences in the Sunshine State.
Since you get to come back to Florida and go see it all the time, and with your book writing, have you noticed any significant changes to the Florida Trail or any of the other parts of Florida since your through hike?
Well, I think it really, the Florida Trail is holding its own without a doubt. And but the outside of the natural areas, there's just people moving in left and right. And there's building something everywhere. Every road is clogged and all that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of people that spend the winter down in Florida.
Yeah.
And furthermore, this pandemic has awakened some people to just chucking it all and trying to seek their dreams and have adventures. And so a lot of areas, campgrounds and things are really full, and I can't blame them. I'm down there camping out myself.
Mm-hmm. That is definitely one of the things here in Texas. We've had trouble getting reservations. There for a while they were blocking it I think you could reserve up to 3 months in advance. I think it's back to 6 months now. And the people in Florida were also telling me just how busy, they can't find campsites and places that used to be very deserted, like Kissimmee Prairie is always full. Like 15 years ago, I could go there and there'd be hardly anybody there. And now
Yeah.
it's packed.
Yeah. I was just there a month ago. They got a backpacking trail. And that's one thing I want to add here is that Florida state parks, they've really opened their eyes to having backpacking options in a lot of the state parks. They got mostly good campgrounds, but they also have backpacking options in a lot of Florida state parks. You're not going to do but a 1 or 2 nighter on most of them, but to have that at all is a very smart thing, and it gives people just a chance to go on a quick 1-night trip. There's a park near them almost anywhere in the state where they can do an overnight experience.
I was going to ask, have you ever done the ocean to lake segment of the Florida Trail?
Yeah, twice.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. Just yet one more experience where you can do a long trail in Florida. And I've also done that. You can walk all the way around Lake Okeechobee. I think it's 100 miles. So I've done that. And I've done about every kind of long adventure you can do in Florida in these winters.
Yeah. The ocean to lake has almost like a cult-like following. The people who live in that area of the state just they use that trail, and I'm glad it's there, but and that it gets so much use. It's good to see.
Yep.
Now, you mentioned your book that you just finished. Are you working on anything else coming up in the next year or two?
Yeah, I'm contracted to finish this hike in New Jersey book. I'm also finishing this for Falcon, finishing this hike in Kentucky book, and I'm contracted to update this hiking guide for New River Gorge National Park. So that's what, and I'm updating. I'm gonna redo the whole book, updating my own book, 50 hikes in the North Georgia mountains. So those 4 will keep me plenty busy in the coming months, and so I should be busy enough until it's time to go back to Florida again.
Yeah. So do you plan your hikes out in advance so you know what you're going to be doing in 3 months, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I know generally when I'm going to be going there. Like I'm going to New Jersey at the beginning of May, because these books, for photographs, you want to have some leaf out versus barren brown.
Right.
So going there in May, working on the Georgia book in June, going to New River Gorge in July, and I'm doing the Kentucky kind of interspersed. I'm almost done with that book. Only got to do 12 more hikes for that book. So yes, I do know roughly, but everything's dependent on the weather. If it's going to be raining for a week, I just shift and adjust.
Yeah. Now, do you try to camp and do this stuff in fair weather, or do you, if it's going to be raining for a couple of days, you go out anyway?
Well, put it this way: if I'm not going back to New Jersey I'm not coming back from New Jersey till I'm done.
Okay, so, getting it done.
Yeah. So the farther it is, the less I'm going back and forth. Now, somewhere like this Kentucky book, since I live in Tennessee, it's not far, so I just kind of bounce around back and forth. And when I go up to West Virginia, even though it's not that far, we're going to stay there the whole time until I'm done.
Right. Now, have you done anything on the Mountains to Sea Trail?
Yeah, I got a book coming out, or it's coming out just any day now. It's called Can't Miss Hikes in North Carolina State Parks. And had a lot of segments of the Mountains to Sea Trail. And also I got a hiking guide for North Carolina's National Forest, which also has a lot of segments of the Mountains to Sea Trail. And it's funny you mention that, because that is one that I would like to through hike and perhaps write another memoir book.
Yeah, that one intrigues me a lot. I've interviewed a couple of people who have hiked it, and I don't know. It just seems like a really cool trail. It's a little bit Appalachians, a little bit low country, and you get to see a lot of interesting things, I think.
Yep, I think it would be a good adventure. Maybe I should do it.
Yeah, you should. I mean, it's there. Get it. Well, I wanted to close out. Where can people, find you online, your website? Where can they buy your books? I'm sure they can buy them, Amazon and all of that, but I don't know if you sell them on your website or not.
Well, the best place, since I got over 80 books covered in all the parts of 27 states, they're mostly regional. So the regional books, you're going to find them wherever you're at, whether it's Pennsylvania or Florida or wherever. So the best source, it really is Amazon. You just type in Johnny Malloy books and you'll have more choices than we got time.
You have plenty of hiking to do once you get that.
That's right.
Well, do you have any final thoughts for hikers if you're heading out on the FT? I mean, you gave a lot of, I think, good advice and tidbits throughout this already, but just any advice for hikers for the Florida Trail or just getting out on any trails in the Southeast?
Just go out there and do it and focus on the experience and not the gear. Don't worry about if you don't have the right this or the right that or the best shoes or the best this. This guy that was a friend of mine, he's friends with me now. The very first backpacking trip, he wanted to go so bad with us that he literally used a plastic garbage bag, and slung it over his shoulder and went to the Smokies with us.
Wow.
So the point is to do it. Don't worry about the stuff. And don't watch a video of everywhere you think you might go, because it ruins the experience. Leave something for a surprise, because there's nothing like when you turn that corner on a river or you climb to the top of a mountain, you see that view and you've never seen it before. But if you looked at 27 videos of it, what's the point?
Right.
Leave some adventure.
Amen. I hear you. It's easy for so many people who are researching backpacking trips, and they get hung up on the gear. They get hung up on, watching all these through hiker videos. I don't know how people have time to hike and edit videos. I have not figured that out. And I can't even keep up with watching them. I watch a few here and there, and I'm just like, how do you have time?
Yeah. And it just, there's this buddy of mine here in town. We'll plan a trip, but I can't tell him where I'm going or tell him where we're going because he'll look it up.
Yeah.
So just leave a little bit of something to chance, and let the adventure unroll before you.
Well, Johnny, thank you so much for coming on the podcast to talk about, this 40 years of amazing hiking and outdoor life that you've got. And hopefully you've got, maybe 40 more years, 20 more years, 30 more years out ahead of you.
I hear you. As long as the good Lord will let me walk, I'm going to keep putting one foot in front of the other.
That's it for my conversation with Johnny Malloy. You can find the show notes for the episode at orangeblaze.thegardenpathpodcast.com, and you can find me on Instagram as OrangeBlaze Podcast. If you haven't had a chance to leave a rating or a review on iTunes, maybe drop a 5-star rating and review for the podcast when you get a chance. I would certainly appreciate it. And be sure to tell your hiking friends on the trail this season about the podcast and the Florida Trail. Until next time, happy hiking.
The Green Tunnel is a production of R2 Studios at the Roy Rosenzweig Center for History and New Media at George Mason University. Jeanette Patrick and Jim Ambuski are the executive producers. Thank you to Misti Ridley Little for sharing today's episode of Orange Blaze, a Florida Trail podcast. At R2 Studios, we're on a mission to democratize history through podcasting, and we invite you to join us. So head to r2studios.org and click on Support Us to help us make the best history podcasts out there. That's it for today. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon.